Hi, everyone. Welcome to Web3 Needs a Rebrand panel. I got my clone with me. He wanted to come. He wanted to wear the Sambini, so that's the boss. There is a lot of things that, I've been in the industry now since 2017. I've been working with the largest brands in the world trying to bring that into Web3. I've been working with the largest, smartest founders in the industry as well, really trying to break through, go mainstream. And that's why, I proposed the guys to put this panel together around the rebrand of Web3, which, is something that I've been a bit vocal for a minute now. Because the way the mainstream look to our industry is still very premature, right? There's a lot of scams, there's a lot of scandals, there's a lot of different things that happen. But for me, most importantly, is that element of the customer is not in the room, right? We keep building for Discord, we keep building for launching tokens. We were just talking about it right now, how difficult it is for founders to raise in the industry if they are not launching a token. There is no element of just raising on equity or anything like that, right? And I wanted to put this conversation together, especially with those guys, because we are coming from different angles. Obviously, we'll quickly introduce Steve, heading the marketing and CMO at Rion, Rugema, co-founder of Schiller, Mark, obviously working with the ATP tour on comms and leading Web3 as well, and then Mo with the Miracle senior business development there. So we're coming from different angles, and that's why this conversation for me is so exciting, because we've got Web2 brand that has stepped really well into Web3 and is kind of like bridging that gap. We got Schiller from an agency perspective that is working a lot on the elements of how you grow within the industry. We got Rion that just went through a huge rebrand, which I would love to tap in a little bit more. And then we got the Miracle as well that is natively building in the industry and trying to go from there. So I'll go straight in post intros with my first question. And I'll break that down. I think is very relevant for you, Steve, which it's around this concept of jumping the chasm, right? So essentially, if you think or if you remember visually about Evel Knievel, right? The very famous stuntman that is jumping over cars and trains and trucks and different things like that. Web3 feels a lot like it, right? How do you jump the chasm for the bubble we're in, the niche we're in, to the mainstream, right? How do you go from early adopters that obviously are incentivized from a token perspective or financially to people outside of the industry, people on the streets that actually give a fuck, right? So you guys, I know very well because I've been following the journey for a very long time, are more and more tapping into it. But what is very interesting for me from your perspective is your background, right? You're coming from Web2 world, you're coming from comms, from brand, your entire career around that. And now you're here in this industry and trying to do what, a lot out there to do, but obviously is quite difficult. So how a brand like Rion or in general go about jumping the chasm, go about bringing, Web3 comms or Web3 brands towards the mainstream? What is your take on it?
I think to me, it really boils down to product marketing. I think it's like the most undervalued role in this space. You don't see product marketers at many companies because most companies don't have a product to market, or they don't even think of their token as a product in many ways. Like, I think if you can't explain the unique value proposition that your product plays in people's lives, you can't cross the chasm. Because like right now, our industry is very much still us. It's business to geek. It's all of us. We love the tech. We understand the promise of it, but it's not scaling. And I think there's a lot of different reasons for that. There's like the branding of crypto and Web3, and there's also like, what we're building things people actually want. And I think we haven't really solved that yet. And we're still doing. I think that the debates happen every day. And like from a UX company focused like us, it's like, well, are people going to onboard through social wallets or through email? Is that how they want to log in? It's like, I don't think so. I think they want like the technology. We need to have the use cases where the product supercharges people's passions and the things they already want to do, versus trying to solve problems that don't exist or solve technology problems that we find interesting, which is how I think we spend way too much of our time right now, is like solving these niche technology problems that are created by the tech that we built, the tech stack we built. But I think fundamentally, like, it does boil down to like to cross the chasm. Like the people in the early adopter phase, they were there because they were early, they were excited about it, but they're not the aspirational audience that you scale with. You have to kind of find a true PMF, and your marketing should be the product and the unique role you play in your customer's life, whether that's a consumer, whether that's a business, an enterprise, a developer. Like, those are like hyper-serving your audiences and really communicating to them in a clear way the role, what you enable them to do with your product.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. How do you feel like coming especially from that Web2 world and having a very strong brand background, how do we feel we do that in the industry? Because it's very challenging, right? We see attention obviously being the main thing, tokens being the main incentive, it's all about rewards, but how do we sort of like break out of that model and get on the hands of people that don't care or don't even think about any of it, but at the end of the day will be using a Web3 based or Web3 backed product? Like how do you see that as a brand lead in the industry?
Like, coming from the companies I came from, like Nike and Sonos, like everything was about the experience. You wouldn't put anything out in the world that was subpar. And I think we have like the opposite in our space, where we focus on quantity over quality. We focus on short-term attention gains, and it forces companies to be super, I think, just inconsistent with their messaging, with their branding. They rebrand and rebrand and back to the old brand. I see this happen all the time. But there's like I think the idea of brand is very undervalued. The idea of design is very undervalued. The idea of messaging is very undervalued in our space, because we're constantly chasing these short-term narratives versus building, like, the best brands are consistent. And like, I think we view consistency almost like it's boring, but like boring companies make money. But it's alongside that, like, you can't mean anything to anyone if you're constantly changing. You can't be an AI company this week, then something like a DeFi company. You can't do that. So I think there's a lack of value around quality and consistency, and we overvalue mind share and attention. That is all short term, because you're gonna. It's also how you burn out. Like, you can't be at the top of the Kaito charts every day. It's not possible.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that with Cookie and Kaito right now, right? That fight for the short term attention, as you're mentioning. It's really funny that you mentioned about brands not being a thing in Web3, because I talk to a lot of founders and like, no, the product's going to do it. The product's going to do it. It's like, yeah, but then how long can the product do it? And what holds you back from someone coming in, copying your product, putting their brand on top, and running away with it, right? We're seeing in an early stage still, and I'm biased because I work with Cookie for over 2 years now, but Cookie literally is doing that, right? They went in, they made technically a better product, if you would argue. And now they're kind of like running and stealing market share from a monopoly in the industry so far. So it's interesting, because founders are definitely betting much more on the product per se rather than brand. And from your background, obviously, that doesn't play the long-term game.
But I also think, like, you're even seeing, like with Kaito, I can pay a monthly subscription to monitor my mindshare, but I could also then pay them to run influencer campaigns for me to run to the top of the mindshare charts. Right. Like, that's a bonkers setup. Like, and I think they're a great product, but it's like, you can game your own metrics, and prove that what you're doing is more impactful than what it actually is.
Yeah. Talking about performance marketing, I want to go a little bit towards your side, Rugema. Obviously, is a very core element within the industry. I think that what you just said is exactly that, right? The industry, I tend to say that the classic founding mechanism within a company is you have a business guy or girl, and you have a tech founder. They get together and they start MVP, and pivot, looking for product market fit, right? And a lot of times they end up approaching brand the same way, right? Yeah, we're just going to keep changing the message. We're going to see what sticks. We're going to do stunts. We're going to run, paid, or we're going to pay Kaito so we are top of the chart. So I think the concept of growth market that comes from Web 2 is very sort of like dystopian within Web 3. And I know a lot of what you guys do is rather the opposite, right? You adding value, you're trying to create that long tail. So how is that element of performance marketing plus branding in Web3 in such a difficult scenario that Steve just painted? How do you guys navigate that, and what clients are looking for, and how has been your experience so far?
Thank you. Yeah, great question. I think going back kind of 4 years, and obviously things change very quickly, one thing that has been consistent is this issue about branding in Web3, about trust, about the reputation being very seen as, crypto is a scam, or extraction versus kind of building value. Where we come from at Salha, we wanted to kind of flip that and, like you say, go more organic, more authentic, think about ways to add value and retain community, rather than kind of do the opposite and say, how can we get as many users as possible? How can we get a large audience as possible? Because I think the quicker you kind of gain that audience, you can lose it, because that's very much to do with what's trendy. Obviously, there are products now, like you mentioned, Cookie, Kaito, which incentivize that type of behavior. And we think, when used correctly, it can be very valuable, but we've had to navigate the industry very differently and almost say no to those type of opportunities, because if the value that they're trying to add, whatever brand or company, isn't looking at the long term or trying to add value to the space, whether it's innovation, whether it's a novel way of building community or creating products, then we've had to kind of follow our North Star and say, that's not exactly how we want to operate. So we've had to be very selective, very niche. And a lot of the times people come to us and they say, oh, we want to get this X many followers, X many likes or whatever. And we have to say, look, that's not how we operate. Although we do check KPIs and we do performance marketing in some ways, we see Web3 less as a funnel and more of a culture.
Right.
And when that is your, as you say, your main core value, your North Star, then you operate very differently. And again, there is space for agencies or other products that incentivize more of the performance side, the hype cycle, whatever it might be, because that is needed. There will be an audience for that. But for us, I think it's very much about how can we create long-lasting memories, how can we create cross-pollination, build community in a way that allows people to really feel part of what's being built. So yeah, that's kind of how we approach things, and we have to mix and match the kind of two sides of that, performance versus organic side.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation to be in, right? Because it's kind of like a chicken and egg, where the industry is used to run that way, and at the same time you're trying to change how the industry runs, but doing things differently won't be as effective, quote unquote, for short-termism and for vanity metrics. So you're kind of like always trying to play that catch-up game, right? Which is, if you don't do this, you won't get the same results. But if we keep doing that, we're never going to evolve as an industry. So being that one that is pushing and pioneering different ways of doing things is difficult, because then, who's going to take the risk? So yeah, I totally feel you and hear you, because there's a lot of what I experience as well. And I think that, taking a stance and deciding who you want to work with and what your value proposition is the only way forward, as we obviously all here see it and believe that this industry has got legs and is going to keep evolving. How do you think, or based on your experience, how do we go from a niche audience that you are trying to cater, let's say on CT or on Discords, or people that have heard of the technology or are passionate about it, let's say people that are in the bubble, and how do you use similar tactics to go outside of the bubble and provide value to them, right? We've seen a lot of projects going to TikTok, for example, catering to new audiences. We've seen the craziness of sponsorship, which I find so mental, that everybody's sponsoring. Like, as soon as you get to a certain level in crypto, you have to sponsor Formula 1. You have to sponsor a stadium, which is so bizarre because the numbers are so big, right? You look into sponsorship for a kid is like 25, 30 mil for a 5 years contract, and people that are watching the game see that logo but have no connection whatsoever with it. So there is that gap of like, within the niche, we're trying to sell to the same people, but then once we get outside of the niche, we try to go to the biggest stage where nobody recognizes. Like, what is in between? How do we jump that gap? How do we bring that closer? How do we create value to the mainstream audience from a marketing perspective in your angle?
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think it illustrates how young this industry is.
Right.
And I think long-term and maturity is is one of the factors that, although unknown, it will be very important to allowing us to get where we are. I mean, when we think about legacy brands, you know, your Coca-Colas, Nikes, they had to adapt their marketing strategies over time. We didn't really necessarily know what they were doing back then, but they're a stalwart now, and we know what they do. And definitely there is a misconception that more eyes, more money, more numbers leads to sticking. So I think it's about going slow but steady, and kind of building ways to connect, build that community and sense of memorable, whether it's small things like events, whether it's evergreen media, podcasts, etc. And I think you do need to kind of get with the times. And I think a lot of people on CT used to think, you know, Instagram and Facebook or Meta, whatever, like TikTok, that is the, you know, Web2, that is completely different audience.
Right.
But as we can see now from teams like Doodles and Chimpers and many more, they're using TikTok. They're using, obviously Pudgy is a big one as well.
Yeah.
Going into, I think it was at Walmart with the plushies.
Yep.
So I think thinking outside of the box when it comes to the ways that you reach your audience and being okay with using more mainstream tools, but at the same time being unique with it, like putting your own stamp on it, making sure you're using your brand or your values in the way you want to. Because, yeah, the human brain hasn't really changed, just all the tools that we have. So if you still use the same, it can be very basic things like word of mouth is still very powerful. If you still maintain those types of things whilst adding with the new tools and the new kind of technologies, I think through there and over time you'll see the effect that you want. But again, remains to be seen with the new tech that's coming out, you know, AI as well, and that conversation with blockchain. There's going to be a lot of different things and challenges that we see.
Right. You said something interesting there about Pudgy Penguin. Who here is familiar with Pudgy Penguin? Show by raising your hands. Pudgy? 2, 3 people? Okay, 4. Who here is familiar with like Scrub Daddy? I don't know if you remember that. It was a sponge that won on Shark Tank big time. You know, it's basically a sponge. The guy pitched really well, and you know, he's used to like wash dishes and clean dishes and things like that. Now Pudgy is doing a partnership with them, right? Like there's zero connection there, but it's a lot of what you're saying. How do you tap into a totally different audience? And Pudgy essentially is an NFT project that started a couple years ago. Are penguins, 10,000 penguins, but they're cute, they're nice, they're very memeable. There is a very strong IP behind it. And I think what you just said is exactly that, right? They're doing exactly that book, which is interesting. We tend to call that, you know, in branding, which is bringing the customer from AO12 to AO17, right? So how do you get the person that is going to AO12 all the time to go to AO17 and buy something different, right? And Pudgy, I think, is one of the best in the industry doing that. Talking of mainstream, I don't know if you were there or not, but it's still, not because you're here or not because you work with them, my favorite project of all time in the industry has been the ATP NFT collection back in, 2022, which was, I highly recommend whoever is here to look it up after. I don't want to take too much time to explain it. But for me, it was a great example of how do you merge different audience, how do you leverage technology with IP, how do you get people that are fans or people that are from outside of the industry to be excited about something, not because of the technology, not because they're going to buy some new, you know, shiny object, but because you culturally are tapping within a use case, within, you know, a specific fandom or in the industry. Culturally, as obviously you are in this threshold of like mainstream comms, but also innovation in Web3, what are the biggest challenges you face while trying to push Web3 forward within ATP, or while trying to push, you know, upcoming technologies or new technologies that are little understood and a lot of times overhyped to a mainstream audience, especially fans that, you know, is a very hard, die-hard fans are really difficult to talk with. They're not necessarily the most open for new things. They want that tradition element of it. How do you navigate that ecosystem?
So I think the key to the answer to that question is we don't try and sell this technology whatsoever. So just for reference, ACB Tour, it's a sporting organization. We run tennis events and we promote the sport of tennis. And the last couple of years, we've had a Web3 division that's been innovating in this space. So these guys come at it from the opposite end of the spectrum, Web3 products and marketing. We are a very old-fashioned global legacy brand that's trying to find an edge using this technology. I resonated a lot with what Stephen was talking about around design, branding, product. What we focus on and what's been the biggest catalyst for why we've been successful in this space is that we have a really clear focus on what the problem is we're trying to solve.
Right.
And as a business, we know very clearly we don't know our fans, and we have a very fragmented user experience. We believe, and it's been my thesis or my hypothesis, that Web3 is a unique solve for that problem, but it is the last consideration when we're building stuff. We start with, what can we build that adds genuine value to fans or joy to their experience? How do we talk about it in a simple, cohesive way that's resonates with our brand and how our fans consume the sport? And we ask ourselves all the damn time, does this truly need to be on chain? Most of the time the answer is no. So that's how we view it. Culturally, you'd probably expect that leading this charge at a brand like ours is quite hard, but it's actually surprisingly easy. And it's not because I'm brilliant or because I'm some genius. Sport is just really hungry to innovate.
Right.
We recognize that compared with tech companies, compared with other entertainment brands, we are behind the 8 ball. We're slow to evolve, and we realize that we are losing fans to these other entertainment propositions. So, when you speak to senior management, when you speak to the board, yes, there is a fear about an unknown technology that they don't truly understand, but the opportunity to innovate and do something new is a huge carrot for them. And I think we're getting over that hurdle. In 2022, when I talked about NFTs, the legal team, they go, oh my God, what is this industry? They were a lot more risk averse. 2025, we're a lot more comfortable with it, and I think we're not alone in that front. So the answer is it's actually easier than you probably imagine, and as to how we market it to our fans, we just don't. We're creating products which has this technology on the back end as an enabler. They never see or touch the tech.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
Yeah, it tends to be the simplest answer, right? Elon always says, right? The simplest answer is the most likely outcome on those sense, right? But it's funny how we kind of go around, and then we come back to the beginning, right? Of just don't talk about it. What matters is the experience, right? Brand is the experience that is built on top of a product, right? And so comparing 2022 legal and all those difficulties to 2025, what keeps making you wake up and say we got to push this thing, right? It still makes sense. We want to push this. I see the vision behind it because I obviously have worked with the largest brands in the world from 21 to 23, where that bull run was happening, right? I work with Adidas, with Porsche, with Skoda, with Salesforce, with Unilever, MasterCard, you name it. And out of a sudden, everybody kind of just went, we tried the pilots, we tried to talk within that audience, we entirely forgot about our mainstream audience, we tried to bring our mainstream audience inside of the jar, didn't work, this industry sucks, we're never coming back, right? But you were experiencing something very different. How is that feeling, or how is that motivation, or what are you guys seeing that those brands are missing?
Okay, so for me, there's two main motivations. The first one is just how low the bar is today. The opportunity is enormous. There's 1 billion people who watch the sport. Today, we know less than 500,000 of them. That is a huge runway to do something really special from a very low bar. That feels like asymmetric upside to me. The second motivation is every once in a while, 2-3 times a year, you'll come across a project or a product that really blows your mind, takes your breath away. If you're familiar with a product called Sling Money, I don't know if you've used that app.
Yes.
Built on Salha, international money transfers. The first time you use a product like that, it's like I can't even describe a parallel. You almost can't imagine the world before it. Oh, I used to pay huge fees and wait 3 days to send money. Mm-hmm. You have experiences like that, which are like light bulb moments where you can no longer imagine going back to a world without it. And when I see these examples, there's another amazing project that's coming up called Inversion Capital, and I love their model. I don't know if you're familiar with those guys. No. They just launched an L1 and Avalanche, but the business model is acquire legacy business, integrate blockchain into them, and make them more efficient. So they're looking at buying telecoms companies and so forth. And it's these like 2 or 3 projects a year that you see where you go like, oh my God, like there's a step change there.
Right.
And like, that's what I want to do for tennis fans. I want a tennis fan to wake up and go like, oh my God, my experience of consuming tennis is so much better than it was last season. How did they do that? It feels like magic. Oh, well, the answer is there's Web3 on the back end, which means your experience is more unified, we're marketing to you better, we're giving you more opportunities to spend money, it's less painful. That's what drives me and that's what motivates me.
Love it, love it. Mo, you're coming from more sort of like native brand, native company within Web3, catering a lot to Web3 users, and also looking into how you kind of like step up from there, right? Within an industry where tech is becoming more and more a commodity, right? Like you can just like literally copy a product. Now with AI becoming much easier than ever before, vibe coding is a thing. Now we see many posts now of people saying, yeah, like I'm hiring a developer, I'm paying 10 grand, go there and copy exactly that product and let's go to market. So when technology becomes more and more just an equalizer rather than a differentiator point, how companies like yours is trying to differentiate itself, right? How does it stand out? How does especially because you're in the business development side of things, so you're trying to get clients to use your product, and the main element you most likely trying to pursue is what is in for them, right? And what is holding back someone to come and say just like copy pasta, done, we're gonna go after, it's gonna be cheaper, faster, and more reliable than what you have right now, and we're gonna run with it, right? How you seeing that from the daily conversations you're having, from knowing your competitors, from being at the forefront of those sales conversations as well?
Actually, it's a very good point, because if you have a startup, you can concentrate on 2 things. You push marketing, and your product is not really ready yet, and you build like the lean startup method. You pivot and you add some things on the way, or you do it how we did it. We didn't invest at all in marketing. We built product for 3 years, and we just closed MetaMask, and we didn't went out with the products, especially for this reason that you said, that we could have like went out with a big beta and everybody sees it, and someone else copy it with a bigger marketing budget, and they probably could have stolen MetaMask under our fingers. So we really concentrated 3 years on building a product till it's like ready, until people have exactly this effect that you had, this aha moment. So what we did, for example, is everybody have holdings, NFTs, tokens, and everybody was screaming for what's the utility, the last bull run. What's the utility before you buy something? But actually just 25% of the people are claiming their rewards or perks or using this kind of benefits. Why? Because they don't know they exist. So we just created a model where all of those perks are aggregated in one place, in one API, that if you log in one of the endpoints that will support us, MetaMask in this summer, we read what you have in your wallet, and we were just going to tell you, listen, because you hold the Pudgy, you get a free ticket NFC. Because you hold Azuki, you get 50%. So this was somehow, in my opinion, missing in the space. We are so far with technology. Why we still have all of this friction? Why we still need to jump from Discord to Telegram to email? So in general, the quintessence is we just need to create a cool product.
Right.
So before bursting out and talking about something that isn't even ready. So that was our approach to product first, and marketing with the first big partner then.
Right, so being a first mover has given you guys advantage to be probably the biggest or the most used application within the industry.
Yeah, I will say that our solution will be industry standard. So we're not just talking with MetaMask, we're talking with OpenSea, BitKit, OKX. Everybody's like, oh, why no one else did it before? So,
right.
Actually, it will hopefully be industry standard. Who knows what will happen? I think we have a pretty solid position that we're going to be live at MetaMask with an airdrop claim tab at the beginning,
Right.
and later on we're going to add different categories like events. So we just want to show people the value above the floor price of what you're holding. You know,
Right.
It's like an interoperable key to many other benefits that you have.
Right. And just to follow back on the idea of like, what happens if tomorrow I copy your tech and I do exactly the same thing you do, but now I do it better? How do you defend that position? How do you see that the business is thinking about it? Because a lot of times is the issue within fast-moving tech products that, you know, having the first mover advantage is obviously great, but we've seen that over and over, especially with L1s, right? Now Solana is stealing the cake from everybody, and now there's more coming, right? Now Base is obviously putting the foot on the gas, and we see that sort of like big fight within L1s to see who is the next big one in town, right? Apart from product innovation, how do you feel like is community, or is, you know, what is making people stick around? That's what I'm trying to get to.
I mean, it really depends on if it's a B2B or a B2C.
Right.
So of course, obviously, if you're talking about a project that targets end consumers, there it's really community. So and I'm not talking about followers or people that I don't know, let's follow the hype, or what we saw with Laudio now all over the timeline. Where are they now? You know, I mean, it's not really a proper community. But if you build something special with your community and you solve a pain point and you grow with them, and I think community is like so underrated, and this is why the big brands are tapping into it. So just as a background, I come from Web2, so I also have an agency working luxury brands navigating in Web3.
There you go.
So I help Diesel, Maison Margiela, Jill Sander, and everybody's looking exactly into this element. They want now suddenly this closeness to the community. So this makes a huge difference. And on the other side, B2B, we are just happy that we collected data over the last 3.5 years. You cannot just copy that, you know, so you cannot just come and try to somehow tap into the data that we collected. So we are somehow the miracle safe on that side.
Awesome. We're running out a little bit of time here. Someone has lapped on my shoulder. I hope it's not boring. I hope he's the only one. But to close out, I would love to get like a word or a sentence. I'm gonna put you on spot right now, which is, how do we, because you know the whole idea of like rebranding Web3 and changing the idea of how people think about it, or the experience, how people feel it, or trying to wipe out a lot of dirt that we have in Web3 is really hard, right? When you say, like, oh, I'm a crypto guy, oh yeah, like there's a very clear framing that you get from mainstream. Blockchain, people are kind of like, oh, and then Web3 now is going towards the same framing, right? Very negative. So that's the idea of rebranding. And one of the main things that I personally think about on this rebrand element is not just changing the message. It's not just like explaining it easier. It's not just like, okay, we won't talk about the tech anymore. I think a lot of that has to do with the customer, right? I don't remember, I think, Mark, you said that you start with the end in mind, right? The experience, and which technology you use for it doesn't really matter, right? What matters is how the customer feels about it. How, and very short, one word, a sentence, how do we bring the customer in the room in Web3? How do we get them to be inside of our industry? Again, not in the bubble, not in the tech talk, but to actually use products that are powered by it. And I'll start with Mark, because I feel you are very keen to talk about it. Give me a word or a sentence on how do we do it.
Show, don't tell.
Show, don't tell. Steve.
Meet users where they are.
Meet where they are. Rugema.
Yeah, for me, it's culture.
Culture. Mo.
Solve a problem, make it simple.
Right. So we always saying is like no news, right? And we going back to the basics, right? Like it's no news, we're going back to the basics. And I keep saying that we are going around the moon and coming back to the principles of it, right? So yeah, I just wanted to give that as a takeaway, as a thought, food for thought. A lot of times we get very, deep into the ecosystem, very deep into the bubble when we all talking to each other and selling to each other and promoting each other, and we forget about that there is 8 billion people out there that don't care about it, right? So that's the whole idea, and that's what I wanted to bring with this conversation. So thanks for your time. Really appreciate you guys. Thank you very much.